I have to say, I'm sometimes surprised how popular electric hand planers are, especially outside the United States. It surprises me because when I was younger, the only time I really saw one of these used was maybe for installing doors and some rough home remodeling work. It just wasn't a tool that I saw used around furniture making or even in cabinet making shops. But nowadays, I see these used quite a lot, especially outside the United States, where they seem to be really popular. And I have seen some really sketchy things done with these, like shaving a big chunk of wood while holding it with your bare feet. In fact, this can be an extremely dangerous tool. What it removes cannot be sewn back on. But that doesn't mean an electric hand planer can't serve a purpose in your shop. In fact, if this is used properly, one of these can actually be a viable replacement for a power jointer. So if you need to make a cupped or warped board flat enough to run through a table saw or a thickness planer, but you don't have the room or the budget for a big, expensive, dedicated jointer, you're going to want to watch this. First, let's take just a moment to be sure you know how to use one of these safely. There might be slight differences between models, but they all feature a two-piece sole. The back plate is fixed in a single position, but the front plate moves up and down when you turn the knob at the top of the tool. This adjusts how deeply the blade will cut into the wood in a single pass. Somewhere on the body, you may find one or two mounting points to attach a fence. This is used for cutting rabbets or to help stabilize the tool on a narrow edge of a board. Some models have dual dust ports, so you can change the direction of the flying chips or to more conveniently position your vacuum hose on one side or the other. On the rear, you're also likely to find a kickstand of sorts. Now, some people find these annoying, but they should lift up out of the way as the tool slides onto the board and only pop back down when you're done so that you won't accidentally lay it on your bench when the blade is still spinning. What none of these tools have is a guard covering that spinning blade, so they should always be used with the utmost care. That means keeping both hands on the tool whenever it's running, if at all possible. Because if your hands are on the handles, they can't be anywhere near the blade. I will caution you, though, to be sure that you don't turn the front knob as you're gripping the tool, because that will change the depth of the cut and you'll end up with an uneven surface. Like many electric hand tools, you should always wear safety glasses and hearing protection, and you should always be sure that no long hair or loose clothing might get caught in the blade. Also, keep an eye on your cord or your vacuum hose if you're using one, so they don't become snagged on anything. If you're wondering what's up with the cord end on my hose, that's for another tool I'm not using at the moment. If you're working with a long board, you might be walking forward as you cut, so be sure that there's nothing around your feet on which you might trip and fall with a spinning planer in your hands. And always remember that just because you release the trigger doesn't mean the blades have fully stopped spinning, so don't get your body anywhere near them until it's safe. Operating an electric planer isn't the same as using a belt sander. It's not meant to move back and forth over a surface. This is designed to shave wood away one forward stroke at a time. Let's try it on the edge of a board. Set the depth knob to take a relatively shallow cut for the first pass or two until you get to know how the tool will react to that particular material. You can always increase the cutting depth for subsequent passes. The only edging technique you really need to learn is how to start and stop your cuts properly. Failure to follow these simple tips will result in snipe, which may appear as minor scalloping near the board's end, or even as a big bite that can just spoil your workpiece. So to avoid snipe, the tool has to enter the cut evenly without tipping. If the tool tips back off the end of the board, the cutter's going to dig deeply into the corner, and you don't want that. Begin each pass with the front platform firmly on the workpiece. Apply pressure to the front of the tool to keep that portion in contact with the board until the rest of the sole comes onto the wood behind it. As you near the far end of the board, the potential problems reverse. So if you allow the toe of the tool to fall off the end, then the cutters will dig in there as it did before. So as you exit the cut, shift your downward pressure to the rear of the tool, keeping that platform firmly on the wood until the cutters have shaved away all the wood all the way to the end. And at that point, you may lift the tool away. Some compare this lifting motion at the end of the cut to an airplane taking off. Just be sure your plane doesn't lift off until the blades have cut all the way to the end of the board. After a pass or two, you'll quickly get the hang of it. Of course, these instructions are for planing the entire edge from end to end. But there are times when you may only wish to plane a portion of an edge. For example, this edge might have a crown in the center. Now, it wouldn't be safe to place a crooked edge against the fence of your table saw to rip it, because the board might shift and bind mid-cut and you could get a kickback. The short length of most electric planers, though, make it difficult to perfectly straighten a long board, as the tool will want to follow the curves of the wood like a boat on the waves. But you can still do a decent job if you do it right. Begin with one very shallow short pass in the center of the edge. Then make a slightly longer one, and so on until the final pass covers the entire length of the edge from end to end. Because you did more planing at the center of this edge, the board should be straighter than before. If more work is needed, then you just repeat the process. You layer your passes and feather the edge until the crown is gone and you can safely rip the board on a table saw. The same process may be used to straighten a hollow edge where it curves in the opposite direction. In that case, you would take short passes on each end, which grow longer and longer until the entire edge is planed straight. Keep these techniques in mind as we move on to the face of a board. This one has an obvious cup in it. You can see how it rocks on the top of the bench. In fact, there's also a bit of a twist along the board's length. We can solve both these problems with an electric planer. Let's start with the cup. I like to work on the crowned side, where I simply remove more material from the high center than from the lower outer edges of the board's face. Again, I recommend light passes. It's too easy to remove too much material and create a valley where there was once a hill. So check your progress frequently with the straight edge. Once the cup is gone, you can turn your attention to any twist that might exist. For that, you'll need a set of winding sticks. Winding sticks are simply two straight strips of wood where the edges are parallel to each other. You can make a pair from some scraps of wood at the table saw. I also like to apply a bit of tape along the edge of one to produce a contrasting color. The winding sticks are placed on the board's faces, one at each end. Now the goal is to get these two sticks parallel to each other. So sight down the board from the end, using the contrast from the taped edge to help it stand out against the other one. You can see that these are not parallel, so there's a twist in my board. To correct it, I have to plane down the two high corners, bringing the sticks into alignment. Of course, I don't want to only plane down the two corners because I want the face of the board to come out reasonably flat. So I have to feather my cuts out as before, concentrating at the high corners, but still removing some wood from the entire surface. As always, a light cut is best so you don't accidentally go too far. This takes a bit more practice than straightening an edge does, but you'll get the hang of it fairly quickly. Stop frequently and check with your winding sticks to gauge your progress. And move the sticks to different positions along the surface of the board so you can monitor those as well. Before long, both the twist and the cup will be gone, and you'll have one good flat face. But what about the other face of the board? Well, you could repeat the same process on that side, and it could give you two straight, flat faces, but chances are the two would not be parallel to each other. You're more likely to end up with a wedge shape. This is one of the limitations of an electric hand plane. It can straighten and flatten a board, but it's difficult to use it to bring opposite edges or opposite faces parallel to each other. Well, technically, you could make them parallel. I mean, in the old days before power tools, it was done manually with hand planes. What they would do is set a marking gauge to whatever thickness that they wanted. Of course, it would have to be less than the thinnest part of their rough board. Then, with the fence along the good face, they would scratch a line along all the edges and ends, all the way around the board. Finally, they would plane down their rough surface to that line. I think that's more difficult to do with a power planer than with a traditional hand plane, but technically it could be done with practice. Frankly, I think a power planer is best used in conjunction with a thickness planer. Use this to get one side reasonably flat, then feed it through a thicknesser to finish the job. It's not a perfect solution. I'm definitely not going to get rid of my power joiner, but it can be done if you don't have the space or the budget for a dedicated machine. There are a lot of other uses for electric hand planers, but these are the techniques that will really help you get the most from the tool in your woodworking shop. Now check this out. It's just a couple of cuts. Your ears will be fine, right? They will be if you have your IsoTunes Bluetooth earbuds in, because you'd already have your ANSI certified hearing protection on because you're listening to your favorite music and podcasts. And you're supporting a small family business at the same time. Please use the link below this video to learn more and to show them you support what we do as well.